Hey all, back with another Spotlight with Context here, and this one is one of my own designs, Patriot, Eli Bradley. I feel strongly about this character as a whole, but I will kind of leave that out of this just to say, but I don't know, get me waxing rhapsodic on a stream sometime. We can talk about it there. Anyway, getting into the actual stats and abilities, Patriot's base stats are not particularly high. He has access to near constant regen through willpower and a lot of attack modifications, so both of those are on the lower side. It's just something to be expected. And his prestige isn't really exceptional. But champion attributes, we just talked about some of this with survivability at 4. I do think there is real room between where Patriot lands with the constant willpower from having a debuff on himself and someone like Kingpin who has that and a larger health pool and physical resistance, or somebody like Diablo who has all of that and a normal regen rate, or somebody like King Groot who has all of that extra healing, right? Like, it is definitely possible to be tankier and more sustainable than Patriot, but he is in the class below that. Especially if you play well and don't get hit, it is going to be pretty easy to keep him topped up. Similarly, damage of 4, he is probably the very first character I've ever shipped that is a big yellow numbers champion, right? There is real damage here, mostly in the form of big critical hits. We'll kind of go over that as we go. Ease of use 2.5. The basics of Patriot are extremely simple, right? You just block, combo, throw specials, and everything works, right? Like it will come online automatically. There's a little bit of like counting involved basically to make sure that you're throwing his specials in the right place. But this is all the way down at 2.5 because there is a skill ask specifically around the reversal mechanic. And we'll talk about that more as we get to it. But this might be rounding down. I really don't think it's that bad. Like I said, we'll get into that as we go. Utility of 3.5. Patriot's utility is all fairly focused and niche and subtle, but it is very good, right? Like he has a short duration miss counter, but that's all you need for a lot of fights. It covers his full combo. He has a targeted ability to block unblockable, but it's going to come up in the fights where he needs it most. He has some really unique bonuses to how he interacts with debuffs and how he blocks so well that we'll go over as we run through the kit. But just want to call out that this score may look high as you're going through this, but the sum of the parts here is greater than what it looks like. And then Defender Strength 2.5, this is honestly a little bit on the high side, I think, but it is kind of reflecting the fact that Reversal, the new mechanic that we will talk about, doesn't have any counters. We are intentionally introducing this new defensive mechanic on a milder defender so that you can get used to it. And I'm not going to hide the ball. It's going to be on a real defender later. But there's time there, right? And so basically the only threat in Patriot's kit and around Reversal is just the fact that it is Reversal, and there's nothing specifically looking for it. But there are a lot of ways to play around it. There are a few counters. I'll talk about that as we go. But that's pretty much it. Like, the Reversal can happen, and that can be dangerous. There are some conditional ways that he can crit through block, and if he hits you with specials, well, it's gonna hurt. But there's not really anything else going on, and as time goes by, this 2.5 may feel more like a 2. So, getting into the actual strengths and weaknesses, we'll start with the big marquee thing we've already mentioned a few times, Reversal. It's a brand new mechanic. It can let you turn the fight around, and when you use it, Patriot starts hitting much, much harder. It's very cool. We'll talk about it later. So next up, Patriot benefits a lot from debuffs on himself, and he places debuffs on himself, similar to Kingpin, Daredevil, a few others, right? And like them, he's going to hit harder because he has these debuffs on himself. Unlike them, he does solve for inequity, right? Because that has historically been something that's held a lot of these characters back. Not so much Kingpin, because he is bluntly overtuned, but Daredevil, Immortal Abomination, some of these characters that rely on putting debuffs on themselves slow way down in PvP game modes because they were built when Battlegrounds didn't really exist, right? Patriot accounts for that. So a cool thing there. And then he is not a Captain America, right? I don't think at any point Patriot has held that title. He's not Steve Rogers. He's not Sam Wilson. But he is descended from a Captain America. A Captain America that in some versions of the canon held that title before Steve Rogers did. And he does have a lot to take from that lineage, right? And so he blocks like a Captain America, which is to say very, very well. We'll talk about that more as we go as well. So, weaknesses, anyone who punishes debuffs is still going to be a problem. Because Patriot benefits, but he also doesn't stop his opponents from benefiting. So you're still going to take damage against Void. If you're facing the Schadenfreude node, that's still going to trigger. Luke Cage is still going to increase his attack. Invisible Woman is still going to deal physical damage based on those debuffs you put on yourself. And the funny thing is, most of those characters that directly punish that are science, right? That's kind of a weird part about this little section of the class wheel, but there are also nodes that do this, and it's just something to be aware of. These debuffs are on net a large strength for Patriot, but they also are going to get him into trouble if you're not paying attention. And then punishing critical hits. We talked about this earlier. Patriot's damage output is pretty much mostly big yellow numbers. And so if you're facing somebody like Mr. Sinister, who reacts poorly to big yellow numbers or yellow numbers in general, you're going to have some problems. And then lastly, Patriot has no damage immunities or resistances. He has a bit of regen through willpower, like we talked about, but damage over time effects are going to cut through him. He doesn't have a tiny health pool, but it is a little bit below average, and so, yeah, you have to watch out for those things. So, getting into the kit again, we start with Get Back Up Again, this always active section. We mentioned this, incoming weakness effects and the potency of the opponent's inequity mastery suffer 76% reduced potency. So this applies to weakness passives and debuffs and inequity. They still do slow him down, just much, much less than they would somebody else. Additionally, because weakness is multiplicative, when you're dealing with a lot of individual weakness effects, this reduction can actually feel like more than 76% relative to what somebody else would be feeling. I'm not going to get into that math right now because it's very complicated, but just understand that this is a very strong ability, and generally Patriot is going to ignore a lot of those problems. Now, for each debuff on Patriot, he gains a fair chunk of attack rating. This is 13% of his base attack rating, for those following along at home. And this caps out at a max benefit of 7 debuffs, which is right around 100%, right? So he can gain up to almost double attack just from having debuffs on himself. His base regen rate is 44% and cannot be lowered any further than that, but it can be increased. So this means that when you're running the maxed out recovery mastery, which you should be, this will sit right around 50%, and other things can take this regen rate higher, right? Kind of like a Tuma. It's just that nothing can take it lower than 44%. So no matter how many Petrify or Specters or how many points in Despair the opponent is running, this is capped at the low end at 44. And then lastly, while a Science opponent has a Fury passive active, and while Patriot is blocking, he inflicts them with a 40% weakness passive, which gets up to twice as strong based on his missing health. So obviously it's never going to get exactly to 80% because that would mean he's knocked out, but it will get close, and that makes this a potentially very powerful weakness. There are only a few science characters that have Fury passives. This will also listen for nodes. There are places this is going to come up. Some of the largest places that this comes up is obviously against Photon, because she has a giant Fury, and against characters like Joe Fixit or Hulk or any of those. Generally, he's going to block better against those big science champs. Moving on to Prodigious Tactician. Patriot gains an additional hit in his combo meter when striking the opponent or their block with a light attack, or when blocking. So to run through this means that Patriot's mediums, heavies, special attacks all just normally tick up his combo as you would expect. Light attacks that land against the opponent are going to give him 2 combo each, because 1 from landing as a light attack, and then an additional 1 from this ability. But then his light attacks into the opponent's block, or any blocked attack, are also going to tick up his combo. So this means he can gain combo very, very quickly, right? If you parry medium, light, 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 and end in a light attack, that's 10 combo right there. So that works really well against a lot of science characters. This also means that if you are blocking incoming hits from somebody like Quicksilver, if you just sit there and block Quicksilver's special 2, your combo is going to zip right up. And so this can be very helpful in certain places, especially for reasons that we're going to get to later on in the kit. As a defender, Patriot also starts each fight with an indefinite combo shield passive. Trust me, you're not really going to miss this much on attack. I'll be blunt, the reason that this is in the kit is not to make Patriot some nightmare defender. It's because the quest team flat out told me, like, this character will never be used in questing content without a combo shield attached, so it might as well just be in the kit, right? Next up, whenever either champion well-timed blocks, Patriot gains a Vigilance passive for 3 seconds. Obviously, this is not going to be super important when the opponent parries Patriot. It's going to come up in places. But this is very helpful against Photon, against Spot, against Falter nodes, maybe an Ebony Maw. There are a number of places where this is going to help you get around those annoying miss effects. And I want to call out, this does not require you to successfully stun the opponent. You just have to well-time block, so you can also get this Vigilance online during their special attacks. And as a reminder, Vigilance just prevents your attacks from missing. It's not ability accuracy based, it just says, no, I can't miss. Next up, if a personal precision is not active when Patriot knocks down the opponent, then doing so grants him a chunky precision passive for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is very short, but personal precision effects pause for half a second when the opponent or their block is struck. They also allow Patriot to land critical hits into block. That's going to come up sometimes on attack, not that much, may come up on defense. But the play pattern that you're looking for here is that you knock down the opponent, you get this short precision passive, and then you want to be aggressive, right? You want to be hitting them or their block. This also counts striker hits, right? So you can do a full combo into a striker, into a combo, into a special attack, and keep this precision paused that whole time. This does lead to some gameplay moments very similar to like Silk, or those of you who are familiar with Photon's Special 3, she does have one, there's a regen passive in there that behaves very similarly to this, right? It takes some getting used to in maximizing this, but if you're having trouble with it, you can also just knock the opponent down again and get it back up. Heroic Resolve, these are Patriot's unique debuffs. They're indefinite, stack up to 10, and they don't do anything. They just sit on him and fuel the rest of his kit. Now, whenever the combo meter rises past a multiple of 10, Patriot gains one of these resolve debuffs. And separately, he increases his critical damage rating by a small amount for the rest of the fight. So over time, whether he has these debuffs or not, Patriot's critical damage rating is just going to climb as the fight goes on longer. This is very similar to like Shang-Chi has this kind of effect whenever he lands a crit. Patriot has it here just based on combo gain. This is subject to diminishing returns like all critical damage, so it's not going to stack linearly forever, but it does mean that your yellow numbers are never going to stop getting a little bit bigger as you just continue to hit the opponent. And then another source of resolve: whenever a non-damaging debuff on Patriot other than resolve ends for any reason, you gain one resolve debuff. This works on Purifier Cleanse, those are the obvious ones. But it also works on things like the long distance relationship node, because that stacks indefinite debuffs on you, and then when you back off, they will fall off over time. That fall off is still ending, and so that works here. This also works if there's a debuff that has a max stack of 1 and is reapplied. That replacing of a debuff counts as the original debuff ending and will also trigger a resolve. So there are a number of ways that this can listen for nodes and other effects that I want to call your attention to. The big way that this is going to matter against Patriot on defense is that if you stun him, the parry stun is a non-damaging debuff, and so that is going to ramp him. On offense, this means that you want to chase things like long distance relationship or science characters that put debuffs on you, such as Photon, because when they end, you are going to ramp. Lastly, when Patriot is struck by the final hit of a special attack, he loses 1 resolve debuff. If he's fighting a mutant, he loses 2. So you can apply debuffs to Patriot, you can parry him and stun him, but you need to make sure that you're not doing it too often relative to how often you are knocking him down with specials. And so next up we have kind of the big focal point of the kit. This is sudden reversal. This is the payout. So as a defender, when Patriot would be struck by a basic attack, he consumes 7 resolve to execute a reversal. Now there is a glossary entry for reversal in-game. It is also laid out in the dev notes on the spotlight. What this means is that Patriot is going to remove any stun effects on himself, passive or debuff, so you can't get around this by stunning him. He's going to block the incoming attack. I want to clarify, this does not count as an auto block. It looks similar, but don't expect something like True Sense or Undermine to get around it. And then he retaliates with a short-range blast that automatically knocks down the opponent. This is very similar to what Cerastes and Bahamut use in those unique boss fights. If the projectile hits you, it can miss, it can be evaded. If the projectile hits you, you are automatically knocked down. So watch out for that. When executing a reversal, Patriot gains a non-stacking Fury passive, increasing his attack rating by, this is a full 150% for 10 seconds. And I also want to call out that you consume 7 resolve to do this, but you can still have debuffs on yourself. If you have debuffs other than resolve, you might theoretically still have 7 debuffs on yourself and get the full benefit from that part of the kit, as well as all this extra attack rating, meaning that Patriot's theoretical ceiling on his attack rating is somewhere around 350% of its listed base. Pretty darn helpful. Now, we called out how reversal happens as a defender earlier, but as an attacker it's a little bit more complicated. If Patriot would be struck by a basic attack specifically while charging his heavy, then he consumes 7 resolve to execute a reversal. But because I ask you to go to this trouble, for that you get 2 personal precision passives, and his Fury passive gains significantly increased duration. So you're going to be hitting much harder for much longer. You're going to be landing a lot more of those big yellow numbers. And remember, those personal precisions pause when you are striking the opponent or their block, so after you do this, you can go aggressive and hold on to them for a good long time. I'd also like to say on the subject of the heavy charge that if you've played Mr. Negative or Negasonic Teenage Warhead recently, you know that defenders are generally being a bit more passive while you are charging your heavy attacks these days. This is something the team would like to eventually fix. Don't ask me when. I'm going to ignore you because I said not to ask me when. But that is something we do plan to change. In the meantime, however, I want to point out that there is a way around this, especially for somebody who blocks as well as Patriot. Merely block an incoming basic attack, and then immediately charge heavy as the opponent goes to their next basic attack. That is the safest way to land reversal as an attacker. And so when I said earlier that the ease of use was 2.5, this is what I meant. Because to do this properly does require some practice in the current form of the game. Getting into the special attacks. The special one is your ramp special. Each of the 4 hits grants an additional 3 combo meter, meaning that this special grants you a total of 16, right? 4 hits, each one for 1 plus 3, 4 combo, 16 total. That's 1 guaranteed resolve, potentially 2 depending on when you throw it. And then for each multiple of 10 the combo meter passes during this attack, the final hit inflicts a physical vulnerability debuff for 20 seconds, and another if the opponent is suffering from a rupture. So the reason that this is phrased this way is that it's not actually dependent on you gaining the resolve, and it also could benefit from nodes, right? If Patriot were fighting something like the Stylish node that gives extra combo on critical hits, he could theoretically pass multiples of 10 several more times during this attack, and then that means that you can apply extra physical vulnerabilities. So most of the time this is only going to be worth 2 or 3 if the opponent is ruptured vulnerabilities, but there's no cap on it. You could, if the nodes lined up, get 4 or 5, probably not going to go too much higher than that. But just want to call out that is how that works. To extra clarify though, the bonus one from Rupture is either on or off. You're not getting rewarded for multiple ruptures or anything like that. It is simply 1 for Rupture, and then it's counting how many times you passed a multiple of 10. So, the special 2, this is the one that you're going to want to have ready when you execute a reversal. Because if it is activated while the opponent is standing up after a reversal, and don't worry, there's a little HUD icon telling you when your window for that is, then this entire attack is passively unblockable, and personal, fury, and precision passives are paused during this special and for 8 seconds after. So, reminder, on offense, your fury is almost 19 seconds long in the first place. It's going to last for the full duration of the special 2 and 8 seconds on top of that, and then will start ticking down. So this can pretty easily be close to a 30-second fury if you play it correctly, and you can have your double precisions up for a lot of that time as well. You can really do some damage here. Of course, that is assuming that the special 2 itself doesn't just end the fight, because it hits pretty hard. And part of that is this next bullet: projectile hits inflict rupture debuffs for 13 seconds. There are 3 throwing stars, so you get 3 of these large ruptures. Like I said, the point of this special attack is to activate it immediately following a reversal. You can use it outside of that. You're still going to get the ruptures. It's still going to do good damage, but you want that pause if possible. So, in general, I recommend playing Patriot, throwing special 1s if your reversal is not ready, and throwing special 2s immediately following reversal. In some fights, you're going to have to throw more special 1s to make sure you're charged up. In some where you're getting debuffs on yourself for generating extra combo, anything like that, you might just be able to only throw special 2s. The Photon matchup in particular, I never use the special 1. But you're going to have to feel that out depending on the fight. So, special 3, some of y'all have been here before on my channel. This is a fairly standard ramp special. It does refresh all of your fury and precision passives, which can be pretty helpful. But the main thing that this is going to do is the first 3 times it's used, Patriot reduces the number of resolve debuffs consumed by his reversal by 1 for the rest of the fight. So if you use this attack 3 times, you still need 7 resolve to reverse, but it will only use up 4. Meaning that if you're at your maximum of 10 resolve debuffs, you'll drop down to 6, and hold on to almost all of your attack rating from having debuffs on yourself, as well as getting all the benefits of reversal. Like we talked about earlier, it can actually make it very easy to stay up there at Patriot's theoretical ceiling of about 350% attack, basically all the time. So, signature ability. To act is to be committed. Personal precision passives gain 40% increased potency. That's not flat, that's just they are 40% stronger than their base value. Even more yellow numbers. This does scale with Sig level, so you are going to get more damage out of him all the way up to Sig 200. Each debuff on Patriot grants a chunk of block proficiency. This also scales with Sig level, but the rest of the Sig does not. So let's go over what you get right at Sig 1. Against Science Champions, Patriot's block proficiency cannot be reduced below this value, and the opponent's block penetration is locked to 0. So this means that you get Patriot's base block proficiency plus what you have from each of these debuffs, and no matter what the opponent is trying to do to reduce your block proficiency, it can't go below that. On top of that, whatever block pen they have, whether it's from stat focus or just, I don't know, whatever Joe Fixit does, that is turned off as well. And so you're going to be able to block science characters much better. Against non-mutant opponents, so just everyone but mutants, Patriot also has access to a steadfast passive. For most opponents, this is going to be while he's suffering from at least 10 non-damaging debuffs. So a little bit difficult to get online in a vanilla fight. That would mean that you are sitting at all 10 of your resolve for this steadfast. If the fight is feeding you extra non-damaging debuffs, then you might be able to hold on to this more often. I do want to call out, this does mean if Patriot is taking Null on Path 4B in Alliance War, and starts with 10 non-dots on him from Null's Sig ability, he'll instantly be able to block, which is pretty nice. And then against Science Champions specifically, the threshold for the Steadfast passive drops down to 3. So as soon as you get 3 debuffs on yourself, whether resolve or otherwise, you can block unblockables. Obviously, that's pretty helpful against Photon. So moving on to synergies, Patriot does, of course, have one with Kate because they dated for a fair amount of time. And yes, it is difficult to give Kate synergies. Why do you ask? Anyway, Patriot's side of this is that his personal precisions are refreshed when the opponent is knocked into the wall, so you don't have to worry about the fact that they only apply when not active, or when you have your reversal, you get 2 or potentially even 3 if you already had one, and then it can be difficult to hold on to them. Knock the opponent into the wall, all of them refresh. Kate's side of it is that intercepting the opponent with a medium attack pauses trick arrow effects for 2 seconds. This cannot happen again until Kate lands a heavy attack. So some of you may wonder why specifically with a medium, and the purpose of this synergy is not just to give another pause, because Kate has enough pauses built into her kit, right? She can pause by hitting the opponent's block. She can pause by punishing heavies or specials. The problem that this solves, for me at least, is that sometimes when I am going to hit the opponent's block to try and get my pause, they will charge in and I will accidentally intercept them. It's kind of like when you don't want to intercept Rhino, but you do anyway and you get hit. And that can be a little bit frustrating because that might be why you lose your trick arrows. The purpose of this synergy is that when that happens, you get a free pause anyway once, and then you have to knock them down again. The reason it's restricted specifically to a medium is to make sure that this doesn't accidentally happen on your riposte, which would defeat the purpose of the synergy. Some people may not care for that, but for me personally, I think it covers a significant pain point in Kate's kit without giving her any more power because, bluntly, she doesn't need it. Next up, we have Same Thing I Want with the 2 versions of Sam Wilson in the game, Falcon and Captain America. Patriot's vigilance effects are paused during his special attacks and strikers, which means that you can stretch that 3-second vigilance out much longer. Falcon's personal bleeds are paused during his heavy attacks and his special 1. So if you chain multiple special 1s back to back, you can actually hold on to the bleed from the first one through the whole second one. This can add up to a fair amount of extra damage. And then for Captain America Sam Wilson, intercepting the opponent grants a personal bulwark buff without consuming or requiring an armor up, which means you don't have to worry about the RNG of getting an armor up first and then going for the intercept to get the bulwark with all of its extra utility that comes with it. You can just intercept the opponent and have it from the beginning of the fight, which is something that I personally have always wanted playing Sam, because as much as I like him, that was one thing that gets in the way. Next up, we have Taking Up the Mantle with Viv and White Tiger. For Patriot, on activation, his special attack generates 6 combo, which means you automatically get 2 resolve from it, and if you throw it in the right spot, can get 3, and therefore 3 physical vulnerabilities as well. For Viv, she generates solar energy more quickly when striking with light or medium attacks, which makes it significantly easier to just roll through her overall rotation without having to slow down your combo, anything like that. And you are also going to generate solar energy more quickly once you've run out of armor ups, because you don't need to rely as much on converting those. For White Tiger, activating a striker pauses personal precision passes for 6 seconds, meaning that you don't have to worry about using a striker breaking your precision from dashing in. You can do a dash into a full combo, into a striker, and then probably still have time to do another combo before your special, and just stretch that extra critical rating out over that whole chain. Lastly, we have this founder synergy with the other original Young Avengers. I did leave out the later ones for this one. Knocking down the opponent grants a non-stacking cruelty buff for 6 seconds. This is a relatively small cruelty, but it does do something for basically all of them, right? Patriot already has yellow numbers. This makes them a bit bigger. Critical damage increases the size of Kate's cold snaps, thankfully not too much. Cassie Lang benefits from being immune to the buff by gaining a pin particle. Hulkling gets another unique buff and therefore does more damage. And then Wiccan just does more damage, right? So if you can do this right before his special 2, do a little bit more there. And then I didn't want to really talk about recommended masteries, because if you're not running recovery, willpower, precision, and cruelty, why? You should be. So doesn't really feel like those are things to be talking about, but to chat about relics and stat focus for a minute, I do think that there is really only one option for relics for Patriot, and that is the Black Panther. He benefits from basically everything. He doesn't have guaranteed crits, but he gets everything else. He has very frequent crits. All of his damage is physical, so he benefits from a physical vulnerability. And he loves to reduce crit resistance so that he gets all of those yellow numbers his kit is built around. And then for stat focus, it's kind of your choice. You could go crit rate or crit damage, but he already boosts those, so I don't think that that's really the smart thing to do. Personally, I like going for special damage because he already has close to guaranteed crits when you line up his payout properly and do the reversal into special 2. So making the special 2 itself larger on those hits is my personal way to go. But you could also go block proficiency, because this works with his SIG and locks his block proficiency even higher, helps him block that much better. You could go physical resistance or energy as well, just make him tankier in certain fights. I think the offensive choice is definitely special damage, though. Hopefully that's helpful. And that's Patriot. I'm really happy with him. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the specific extent to which he is or is not a photon counter and whatever. I'm honestly not super interested in that discourse. He does that job well. You're going to see a lot of really fancy gameplay with Patriot against Photon. Trying to emulate that is going to get some people killed. You don't have to focus on it, right? if you just literally parry, combo, and block all of the specials against Photon with Patriot, you are going to lose health. But between all of his abilities, and especially that scaling weakness, you're also going to survive. And then you're going to win the fight. And that is kind of what his purpose is against her. He also just answers a lot of the more annoying things that you can run into in the science class. We talked about how he ramps when Quicksilver does multiple hits into his block. He turns off all of the annoying things in Joe Fixit's kit that make him periodically a nightmare in Battlegrounds metas. He answers a whole bunch of nodes that make blocking more painful. As I said right at the start, talking about his utility, Patriot has very focused niche utility, but the way in which he accesses pretty much everything he does is almost entirely unique. And those abilities are going to matter in the future. He is absolutely going to be relevant in places that none of us really see coming just yet. And on top of that, I personally find him quite fun to play. So I'm very proud of this one. I hope you guys enjoy him, give him a run, and let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.